And next up we have Marisa Erven. She'll be presenting on rapid prototyping in XR.
Okay, I just want to do a quick sound check. Does this work for everybody? Great.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for having me here today, and I see some familiar and new faces, so it's wonderful to see everyone. So I'm going to focus today on rapid prototyping for XR. Before we do that, I'd like to do some table setting because I know sometimes we have varied definitions, and so just making sure that we can align for the context of this conversation. XR for this is an umbrella term of any type of extended reality. It includes all of the R's, location-based entertainment, and more. And for prototyping, it's more of the initial creation that continues to be iterated on over time, so versioning. Rapid XR prototyping is for streamlining. So part of my job when I get brought in, because I have a background in art and tech, is to really work on the efficiency of both the art and engineering coming together to create the product as quickly as possible to the min spec of what needs are, what this can look like. So a lot of the key focus points are identifying your target audience, solving before the problem, and then also continuing to solve as you build, rapid turnarounds, making sure you understand your min spec. I tend to think functionally agnostic of platform. The reason that I do this is often working with engineering, there is an agnosticness to what can be created. It's more about the core of the concept and bringing it into the engine and platform of needs. Iterative cycles, so quick bursts are really pertinent here. So I'll try to, if there is a large project, I'll create micro bursts within that macro structure to make sure that there are shorter turnaround times for iteration. Time boxing is also super important so that we can keep that cycle going for peak effectiveness. As long as the time boxing method works for every person and that doesn't preempt burnout, you want to make sure that the time boxing structure works with your team. And then other things that I find really cognizant and essential are stepping away 2 to 3 times minimum per day. It really helps you get that fresh perspective on whatever you're working on. So for context setting in terms of expertise, I only have 2 slides focused on this. It'll be a quick turnaround. But I have over 13 years based in XR tech industries. My specialty has been in immersive spaces, so actually physical and digital combinations. I also worked in gaming ranging from AAA most recently to indie startups as well. Some notables are TikTok first to market, Snapchat gaming for lenses as well, XR walkthrough experiences, commercial global AR. It was created in the Junaio app, actually pre-Apple purchase of that application. And also a number of unreleased and unannounced XR projects. This is also an example of immersive. So I like to put this up here because sometimes people think of pocketing immersive. To me, I keep it wide open. This is actually an opportunity to live paint with an audience in real time at Seven Lions concert, while there were thematic actors circling around, as well as sculptures throughout the whole entire facility. This was at the Wamu Theater for the Chronicles tour. So let's focus a bit more on approach. Rapid prototyping, I like to start with a plan. So for me, it's a lot about organizing thoughts and understanding the design, because if you don't have a strong foundation, you're building on air. It's very important to have a cross-disciplinary approach to make sure that engineers and artists are speaking to each other. Anything that we can do to break down the silos. I also like to loop UI and UX in very early stage to make sure we're all on the same page, driving down the same road. Understanding your market elements and your impact. Knowing your return on investment considerations. So being in commercial projects, it's important to understand what the goals are for ROI, because ultimately your projects will continue if you can hit those targets often. So planning before you get into the driver's seat or start building that engine, understanding the what, why, and how is a focus point for me. Rapid prototyping for teams, iteration, and ideation are key. So whiteboarding for me has been a really valuable experience. I've used it across multiple teams to communicate those vision standards. Expectation setting. What I find is getting the whole entire team to buy into the idea and talk it out until you're in alignment to make sure that you can move forward, setting those expectations so that you're all on the same page. Putting it to paper, we'll talk a bit more about that later. Figma first, UX design. Paper can come first, but definitely Figma flows have been essential from my experience within UX. Design planning and flow assessments. So is this communication working for the user experience for the person who will be utilizing the app or XR experience? The other thing about rapid prototyping in particular, you're not making a AAA and published title. The goal is to get it to launch. And so a lot of what you're gonna see here as an overarching theme is being selective and curating what you put out for that prototype. So often the first 20% will actually get you 80% of the way. And so that's something that will be popping up a little bit throughout the whole entire talk, because ultimately it's aiming for progress and not perfection at this stage. So once you're able to get to the point of adding it to Engine, which hopefully is quickly and efficiently, you can start doing your iteration cycles. So this is where I recommend transitioning to content block-ins, prefabs, planning of prefabs before the prefab creation, and refinement over time. So continuing to iterate until that min-spec is met, assessing your timeline and deliverable needs, often depending on the size of the project and the number of the micro rapid prototypes that you're doing in larger projects. This will need to be an agile structure as well. Continuing that at the baseline level until the shippable standard is met across the board. Catering to your skill sets. So this is something that I recommend from a personal level for everyone to do. And there's an example on the next page that is specific to me. I want to caveat that I've been in the industry a while and I have specific skills with a strong art background. Yours might be totally different. That's great. The point of this is to find what I call your secret sauce if you're making a pasta, right? And so this idea is catering to your skill sets, and it's minimizing excessive wants versus needs. So basically triangulating what your skill is, what the project is, and what the need is, and finding kind of the central area of the Venn diagram for what that looks like. So this is a Venn diagram for your skills. So I've added things specific to me so you can see drawing, rapid prototyping, 2D, 3D digital art, organization, and writing. And inside of those, they're more industry specific as I kind of drill inwards as to how those apply. And so when I say things like cadence between marketing and technical documentation, what does that mean? That means like marketing calendars, marketing rollout plans, launch ideation, things like that. So what I recommend is if you haven't done this yet, just putting something like this together specifically for rapid prototyping. Because that way when you get on the team, you'll know how quickly and what areas you can ramp up to best support the team in the time frame available. One other thing to mention, this will change for you over time, so maybe refresh on a 1 to 2 year cycle cadence as you grow your skills. This won't change per project though, really, because it's the essence of who you are and what you can bring to the table. The other thing for a key highlight is selective perception. So one of the earliest things I learned was actually digital painting. I love it. You could put me in a room for a month. I would totally just paint, right? But that doesn't really help with rapid prototyping at all, actually, once it did. And so to me, it doesn't make sense to focus on that skill set for the intention of rapid prototyping. So for me, it's more setting aside the wants and focusing on the needs so that you can get the best return on investment for your prototype outputs. If you leave that unchecked and if you don't ask those questions, it's very easy to get into feature creep, extension of your prototype. I know it's fun, but just learning to resist and ask those essential questions for prototyping can literally make your career move forward. And so selective perception can really lead to bias and error in judgment. And so it's really important to continue to check your intentions and ensure that it is not a want, but it is a need as you go through the production process for prototyping. So here's kind of a checklist of questions that I found to be helpful for myself that I'm passing forward in case it can be useful to someone else. So am I doing this because I'm interested or because the project needs it? What priority is it? What would happen if I put it in the backlog? Would it impact the XR product? What percentage of people notice if this insert thing here was removed? Does it fulfill the goals? Does it add to the product? Is it in alignment with what we want? So just asking that essential what and that why. So the planning includes communicating with team members, iteration, and getting feedback regularly. And so making sure that those feedback and communications, sometimes I also find studying a dictionary of terms, especially for me, I've worked in gaming, tech, and then the XR space within tech, which is also a specific subset. And so starting a dictionary of different terminology and how it relates to each other. 3C cameras comes to mind between gaming and motion graphics. There were camera conflict terminology. And so just making sure that you're in alignment there can save a lot of headache as well in production. The other thing is the intersection of UX flows and making sure that as the designer is working or if you're supporting UX, it aligns with product vision and end user outputs. Entrusting others' expertise, especially when adjustments are needing to be made and you're not the primary decider or driver on what the user output needs to be. The other thing that I find really essential is paper prototyping. So when I'm in doubt of anything, I just draw things with engineers or game designers or anybody that's a programmer, it doesn't really matter. We'll put it to paper or we'll put it digitally on a Wacom tablet or other device. But just the idea of putting something simple and sketch it out quickly so that you're not hitting those roadblocks when you're already putting connection points into Figma or putting it into the 3D layering systems and getting it earlier and often. So I've kind of broken this out for this next section for XR specific considerations that I've found over time. They're fairly broad in terms of scope, but I'll just step through things I found are good to key in on with rapid prototyping. Is it location-based? Is it site-specific? Where's the QR code going to be seen? Are people going to walk right by it? What is the stability of the network that you have in the region, and can it support your AR experience to begin with? If not, how are you going to supplement that? When you're doing rapid prototyping, if you can do your test runs in physical locations to assess needs, that's optimal. How can you plus the experience? What is the platform and the respective longevity and stability? A lot of AR apps right now are actually still in beta, although they are used publicly. So that's something to keep in mind when you're bidding proposals. How can you approach your optimization to get more out of AR? So optimization can be really huge on mobile devices even now today within rapid prototyping. And how is your wayfinding? Is it easy to view around it, or do you lose where you're at? So each of these are slightly different. So MR, for me, it's a lot of the lighting for the surrounding environment, although you can't control it as much. Is it variable? Where do you want to show MR versus occlude for clarity? So maybe there are sometimes it's not an option to have mixed reality. You have to switch to VR over MR. And when do you choose to close that gap temporarily? Or maybe you don't and just accept that it won't show as well. Where do you point the user in the direction? So what if something hops from that side to that side and my user doesn't know which way to look? The diagram earlier in the previous presentation was great because it showed how open world that is and how quickly the users can get lost if you don't point them and show them the way. How can you capitalize on those capabilities to best show your product or interaction? Also, how can you theme your booth to best be set up for what you're building? Because those two things, the spatial, physical, and what you're creating can balance together. So thinking about the design and talking even to booth designers can get a huge boon to your product because it'll be showing in its ideal environment as well once you start showcasing. And also, how do you control lighting and contrast in a lesser controlled environment? What tools can you use to your advantage to really amplify your message? So for VR and LBE, for that one, it's spatial audio is huge. Horizon line will make people sick if you treat the camera unnaturally. It's a great recipe to not a great user experience. So treating that horizon line well. One of the things about location-based is you travel with the horizon. It stays as you walk, so your mind doesn't trigger motion sickness. But not all VR experiences have that. So just keeping that in mind, treating your camera realistically, even if it's in a stylized sense from a physical lens. How do you direct the user where to look? What method does it offer if you can strengthen your message? And how can you push the experience? What acceleration is available for the deliverable? Excuse me. Are there any questions at the moment, or I can keep going?
Cool presentation.
Thank you. All right, so this kind of moves into the next stage, prefabs and blueprints. So for me, I actually do a lot of planning cycles, especially on rapid prototyping that has a lot more small bits for prefabs. And the reason I do that is because it helps a lot with the consistency of output too. Blueprints is for Unreal, prefabs, Unity. Essentially, this can also be true of user interface design. I worked with the back-end structure of a lot of UI design and requested for things to be containerized. The containerizing the content can really help. It expedites when you need to change things, if you need to swap things out. Everything is isolated in its own bubble, so you don't need to worry about disconnections the same way you can rapid replace things. From a flexibility and efficiency standpoint, that's huge. So anytime you get to this stage where you're putting things in engine, please work with the engineers, work with the UX designers for your buttons, for everything to containerize them so you can reduce fail points later in your project. Especially because often rapid prototyping will, if it's desired to bring forward, make it to a shippable product. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a room, oh, this is just a prototype. Oh, this is just a prototype. Oh, wait, that just launched. And so you want to make sure that you're safeguarding your methods as you move forward to prepare for that eventual launch, because it might be the end product over time. So for prefab content, I've also found Miro to be an incredibly valuable tool. I'll build out visual templates and I'll be like, here are the 20 sections in Miro that we're going to have for this environment or for the next environment. For consistency, they're all going to have the same 10 items per section. So feel free to plot in a sticky note that says this type of tree or this type of building, and then review them before you put everything in. So that way you're not building the content yet. You can look at it on a sticky note, and then you can approve it later for it to go into production. So you're front-loading the ideation cycle as a part of the rapid prototyping product to then come to final output later. So now this is a number of case studies. So I've been brought into a lot of companies to do rapid prototyping for them. We now also have our own company, IZANA. And so one of the things that I've found great joy in is being able to have us do daily rapid prototypes. Because previously it was like 2 months, it was like here and there, and I'm like, how can I push it further? Because this is what I enjoy, is the rapid iteration cycle, so how can I test run it? So to me, it felt natural with the Venn diagram of skills that I have available to me to take it into Snapchat and do lenses. And so we did a prototype case study on that. We started in 2D, so this is the one time that I used my painting skills for good. And I made frames. And then I actually found that because it's not interactive, it's like a frame, but it is for a selfie, even though it was sweet. It got about 12K views, which isn't great. And so I was like, how can we push this further? So I literally took the same thing, I just reskinned it, and it 10x'd itself in 2 days because it was a Halloween hashtag. So that can show you that strategic decision making, you can take the exact same content practically, reskin it, and get an entirely different result in under 48 hours. Then from there I wanted to push it into 3D, so I'm like, okay, we'll try it, our first 3D thing. Let's do something funny. Snapchat likes humor. I don't know if you've seen the taco head thing, look it up, it's ridiculous, it's gotten a lot of views. I don't understand it, but people love it. So I made a unicorn because I like unicorns. And so I made a unicorn horn, and what I realized in testing the different faces and times a day is that the unicorn wouldn't stand out unless I made it glow. So I made the horn glow. So that's a way to work around some of the AR predispositions for lighting. So I took this all the way from scratch into Substance and out, doing a full materials pass. It works in all lighting scenarios. User testing, I modified the eyes to be huge. I broke a bunch of the faces in their tests. They just snapped, and so I really had to go back and test different types of faces, see if they worked, resize it down, resize the chin so it didn't disappear the mouth entirely. So there were a lot of iterations in this process within the 24-hour cycle. I posted on the first day, it made 1.25 million views in under 24 hours. And now it has, collectively, we have over 3 million with a high level of interactivity. And so interactivity matters for the selfie culture in Snapchat. They love to be able to take selfies and have their face change and have those types of motivations. So this wasn't just the horn, it actually has the eyes enlarged, has the chin tuck, the cheeks go out. It has kind of like a little freckling light shape around the under eye to bring that kind of unicorn face forward. So time of day also mattered. The fact that it was later in the afternoon, we just happened to hit the India time cycle. So it picked up at the start of their day and carried it. 3D is innately more popular. And then one thing I haven't tried yet is adding music. So this is some case studies surrounding some XR experience work that I've done previously. So this is relating to whiteboarding. So the first walkthrough immersive entertainment we did was actually at the startup in residence at Pacific Science Center with Hyperspace XR. You'd have backpacks, you'd have headsets, you could walk through the whole experience. It was a STEM-based project with a full story that was very fantastical. So we would actually have a full whiteboard in the back where we would sketch ideas, leave notes for each other, do interactable objects, and it was a great way to communicate async because we had people from up north, from south, from Seattle, and we were all in at different times building out physical structures. So often, like, people were in the back building the plywood and cutting, and I'd be, in leaving notes. And so that asynchronous approach was wonderful for that. The other thing is measurement. For this one, we had a lot of rapid testing requirements. So that was to make sure that we didn't lose tracking. So because it was outward reading, you could lose tracking if scale and the dots weren't read properly. And also, each item in the world equated to a 1-to-1 ratio of scale. So if there was this table in VR, it would physically be here also in the physical space. So you would touch it, and it has to be within the millimeter, otherwise it wouldn't be believable. So a lot of our time is actually artists and technologists and engineers measuring to see that it matched 1-to-1. And so that was really essential. And so that was an iterative, rapid prototyping method within the greater project. So because it could feel repetitive, I also have a thing where I gamify everything just because I like games. So sometimes I'd, make it a point to finish first and see who could get the most accuracy but also finish the first. At other game companies, if we had extended hours where we had to work, I'd hide energy drinks behind people's bookshelves to see how long it would take for them to find it, and just keep it fresh during times where we might be a little lackluster, we might be doing a lot of repetitive things that aren't our top priority personally, just to find the fun in the process. The measurement is a really important aspect of that as well, just making sure that whether it's an engine or physical life, you're attentive to that and the iterative cycle through there. This is an example of a globe interaction. So it was actually a motion tracker on the globe, so if you spun it, it would move, and it would match in game. And so for there, the team came up with that. I thought it was fantastic. And setting that up to be tactile and making sure that it worked and that the globe wouldn't stick, because we had a sticky globe for a while. And so sometimes you have physical fixes for virtual problems, right? So there we actually had to make sure that we removed the dust or whatever was causing it to stick, and then when you'd spin it, you one-to-one. So it wasn't actually a tracking issue, it was a physical globe issue. So don't underestimate the physicality if you're working in those spaces too, that can happen. So supply chain. Sometimes when you're working in cutting edge, supply chain is not your friend. So I absolutely adored the CleanBox technology. I brought it forward, I recommended it to the head of the hyperspace XR company, and he established a relationship with them, but they had just started full on production. I think they started in 2018, which was not that far off from when we started our project, so we've been in communication for a while. So version 2.0, we actually designed spaces for the CleanBox to sit in our kiosk that people would walk through for the experience, which is really amazing, but there is a timing supply chain issue, because early stage production, getting that out, making sure that there's error-proof cleaning, that the boxes were the right size to fit into the wall, which we built out of faith based on the schematics they had online. So there's kind of that balancing act that can happen with early stage technologies. And fortunately it worked out great. We had the timing to be able to get the units for launch, and ultimately it was also out of concern for people who are our hosts, because using those wipes, you're not supposed to really touch them with your hands. They can be very corrosive, and so getting away from the wipe system and moving to that system was more consistent, better for the hosts and better for people that were the guest services as well. And this is just a little bit about how supply chain interacts. This is an article that had been done by GeekWire that talks about the experience. But you can see in this quote, there's a lot of supply chain issues that could come up. So walls, doorways, furnishings, straps, backpacks, VR goggles, electronics, observation deck. We built all of this out physically. And so these types of things, you hit supply chain issues, you need a secondary or tertiary plan on where to get the next thing. And if you can't get it, what is your backup system for that? Or if it goes up in cost 35%, what do you go to next if you can no longer afford the supply chain costing? And so those are things just to kind of build a buffer into your early stage budget for rapid prototyping, because you don't know at what point maybe timber is going to get more expensive or other things coming in, and just understanding that there's a cost association. This one is an IZANA-based project that is the most current for us at the moment. It is app-based, but it is actually relating to collections. So it's about digitizing collections, sharing with others, and knowing your full net worth. And so we want to really cleanly communicate with people how to use this app and have no question marks when they're working on it. And so it's really important to be organized and be able to facilitate on that organization as well. So UX design and planning has been a priority from the start. Just purely from a communications perspective, we failed if they can't use the app. So we've been iterating, testing, iterating, and hot swapping is kind of the current solution we have because there's so many sub-menus throughout this process. The other thing is paying attention to transitions is really important here. So making transitions smooth and seamless to other things. And I would say with XR, there are moments where that is incredibly important. So there are times where you might have an intro splash screen and you need to transition into MR, or if you're going from MR to VR, you can build transition systems that are pieces of art in themselves. And so never underestimate the power of smoothly transitioning a person from one place to another as well. So as we continued on with this process, it keeps evolving. And once I find that things are starting to bloat, my instinct, although I would love to overcomplexify, now at this stage is actually to simplify. So if you feel like something is bloating, figure out where you can trim it, see if you miss it. If you don't, move forward and put it behind you. Because otherwise it'll just over-cumbersome the team with unnecessary factors. So for me, furthering of XR innovation with the rapid prototyping back of your mind is to be agile, flexible, and adaptive. It's actually a mindset to me. It's not the tech. Tech is amazing. I would love to stand up here and show you all the fancy tech because it's exciting. It's why I work in XR, absolutely 100%. But this is what keeps it running to a point that we can launch things functionally. This is what has paid for my career through half of its cycle. Just don't underestimate the ability to be agile and adaptive. Really helps with the furthering of innovation. And setting boundaries, whether it be specs or the product focus area, to let you be your best self in creating the product. So next time you're working on a project, I'm leaving you with a little challenge to just try and experiment on what doesn't this need versus what should I add, and see where that takes you for innovation. Because sometimes I've been very surprised that it'll actually give me a more innovative result than if I did the other way. So value. In technology and XR, also asking what value does this bring? What are the strengths and techniques to use? And honing in on that value message to the end consumer can also help drive innovation perspective. I would encourage you as well, some of the strongest communities that I found are the niche communities. So don't underestimate people that are very tightly focused in their niches, because they are the ones who will stick with you and be there and support. And so if you have an idea and you're concerned, just get it out there, have it live, see what happens, because you don't know how the communities will respond, and often the more the niche, the wider the result and responsiveness you'll get. Strategic market focus. There are a lot of markets that can get kind of overwhelming, so making sure that you have small actionable steps that you take. I tend to visualize a lot in Miro, so I found it really helpful to set a Miro board framing for this. But ask who your user is, make up who the user is, like what are their interests and how do they view the world, and just really try to step into their perspective on how they approach everyday life and how you feel that they would use the tool. And then once you have those ideas, go out into the real world and do A/B testing, or ask people, how would you use this, and see how your thoughts differ from their reality, and maybe you'll get a new idea to fold into your product as well. So tightening in on that understanding of market also helps better the end XR products. In summary, rapid prototyping is dynamic and it's super exciting. But because there's so much out there, because it's so like sky's the limit feeling, sometimes it's easy to lose vision over time because there's so many places you can go. And so just revisit your why and ground yourself in your why. And give yourself lanes and loop cycles, just like a game loop, a core game loop. Give yourself a cycle for prototyping so that you come back to that center. That way you can continue to have fun and excitement and build awesome things. Anyway, I'm really excited to see all that you create. Thank you so much for having me. I welcome any questions at this time.
Okay, we might have time for a quick question or two if anyone's got any.
I have a question. You talked about corrosive hand wipes and stuff. What is the sanitation process that you find to be best?
The clean box actually does the UV-based.
Oh, the clean box.
Like,
Okay,
it actually
the
takes
UV.
the head, it's amazing. It takes the headset in, it leaves it in, it has a specified amount of time. They actually do have medical specifications that I went through to ensure that it is equal or better to the 99%. So you put the headset in, you shut the door, it does its thing, the light turns off, you know when to open it, and you just take it out.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's the one part of your whole presentation that I didn't catch, and I'm glad to have heard her question and your answer to it.
Yeah, so one of the hurdles that I can say that may happen, not that it will, but it may, is the boxes are more expensive than wipes, obviously. So whenever I hit that roadblock, I cheekily put together Excel spreadsheets and I say, here's the number of wipes we'll use, here's the number per box, here's the number over time. And then I actually put the pricing together and show them the metric distance that they'll actually save money over time.
Thank you again, Marisa.
Appreciate it.